talking about your podcast, your theme and stuff, I just held on to a dream longer than most. I just wanted to work in music. That's it. And whether it was selling guitars, whether it was tuning guitars, whether it was building guitars, it didn't matter. Like, I just wanted to be a part of it.
Well, I am thrilled today to start our next episode of the Walk On podcast. I have a guest that I've known for a little while, and we'll talk into the interesting ways that I got to know our guest. But let me start with what the podcast is. Walk On is a podcast about the journey to find one's passion and leading from that place of purpose. And we're getting there through conversations with people living aligned and fulfilling existences. And in this case, I think a really cool existence. And we got here because I've accomplished a range of things in my nearly 50 years, well, not nearly my 50 years of life, but I'd kind of run into a rut professionally. And I really realized that myself and many others are looking for that role, that responsibility, that purpose that propels us out of bed every day, going forward into that rewarding work that makes us feel valued and valuable. So with that preamble, I'm going to welcome our guest, Craig Eck. Craig, how are you?
I'm doing good.
Good. And we find you in Nashville. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Excellent. And we're going to get into who you are and what you do in a second, but it's a nice break before summer gets a little hectic for you. Is that right?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, I got about a month off.
Well, yeah, a month off. So why don't we start there? Why don't you introduce yourself, Craig? Tell people a little bit about what you do, and you've got a month off, and why don't you tell them what you're launching into in a month?
Yeah, my name is Craig Eck. I'm a professional guitar tech. I've worked for numerous artists. I was a touring musician for many years, and I've sort of like really focused in on the guitar tech side now. Being up in Nashville, lived up here for the last, I think it'll be like 14 years in August. And yeah, I just really kind of focus on that. I work for a country artist named Sam Hunt currently, and we are about to start the Locked Up Summer Tour, doing a sheds or amphitheaters and festivals and stuff like that.
That's awesome. We've known each other a while. Actually, you were playing drums in a band. I think I've mentioned a few times that I owned a record label, and all of that to say, Craig, as you know, is we had a tiny little album or a record label. We were supporting a good friend, and that just meant I wrote checks, pretty much is what that entailed. But that's when we met, right? You were working with Gary Pfaff.
Yes, yeah, I was part of the Gary Ray and the Hartwells era of that career.
Yeah, and
I still,
how does go ahead?
oh, I was going to say, I still play drums a little bit, but right now I really just kind of focus on the guitar tech stuff. It's really kind of been like my bread and butter for like the last, almost like 13 years now.
Yeah, so that's where I want to dig into, Craig. If you can, you've said you've been on this role for 13 years or so. How long, when did music enter your life? And when did it maybe become the passion that's driven you into what you're doing now?
I mean, I guess music to me started when I was like just a little kid in the back seat as like my mom would go pick up my dad at the train station outside of Chicago, and it would like, you don't mess with the radio. It was stuck to the oldies station, and it was like always, and when I mean oldies, I mean like the 50s, it was, early Beatles, it was early Stones, it was a lot of Motown. That's what kind of like, I love the energy and the vibe of Motown. That was like my first kind of like love of music in general. I remember asking for a cassette. I think like the first cassette I asked for was the Hollies because of the song Bus Stop. I just loved the feel and the vibe and energy of that one. And then later on, as I got older, I didn't think anything was cooler than Kurt Cobain during the Unplugged performance. Like, there was something about him, like, with the guitar, like, kind of like, what they were capable of doing, but what they were all kind of offering in that presentation. And to me, I was like, nobody was cooler than Kurt during that moment. So that carried me into, like, high school, and then bands like the Counting Crows, Augustana, like those bands are the ones that I like really kind of fell in love with, like lyrically, emotionally, and musically, and just those are the ones that I'm like, I really kind of still sort of like listen to a lot to now and look for that. I like a lot of singer-songwriter type of music.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. The Kurt Cobain thing, real quick. I just remember, and I've seen some clips recently, and I was in college during that whole thing, and there was sort of they were this new leader of this alternative grunge movement, and MTV wasn't really seen as cool, and I just remember him being like, if you don't like MTV, don't watch it. And there was this transition where I think he was really starting to realize the musicality of what he could offer and really how he could be creative. So I thought that was super cool. And like I remember the backseat of the car, my parents listened to everything from, big band stuff to the doo-wop in the 50s or all that sort of stuff, and that's what I grew up was singing. Was singing your first thing, or was it when did you pick up an instrument?
Oh, for the sake of music, I try not to sing at all. I just no. My first instrument was like a guitar. I think like a lot of kids, it's just it's easy to obtain somewhat. Be like, oh, can I get a guitar? It's kind of self. It's not as obtrusive as being like, hey, can I get a drum set? Or like, can I get something that's going to annoy everybody all at once every single time as I learn this? And so I started with guitar, but like all my friends kind of exceeded so much faster than I did. So it was almost like I pivoted and wanted to still like I still wanted to be a part of it. And I remember I did drumline in high school. A buddy of mine woke me up in science class and was like, "Hey, what are you doing in sixth period?" And I was like, "I don't know. I don't have a sixth period class yet." And he goes, "Why don't you do percussion? We'll teach you how to play drums." And I don't know why that like the bells went off. And I was like, I can learn drums at like through school and like and then I can keep up with my friends and that are all starting bands and everything. So that was like one of the main catalysts for the drums. And then I gave it everything. Like at that time I was practicing well a lot because I was kind of like the I was very green going into the drum line, and so I did not want to hold them back. So my drive there was just like for acceptance and to keep up with them, and they were. I mean, I probably never progressed more as a musician from like probably like my sophomore year to like my first year out of high school. That was like my most drumming like absorption for sure.
Wait, and when did you know? So music always resonated with you, but when did you know you were really musical? Was it that switching from guitar to drums, where it's like, this is hard, I have to learn it, but it just was natural to you? What when did that
Um,
click?
I don't like natural. I wouldn't really use. I mean, I definitely was. The thing I do like about the drums is it's organic and it feels so like all the love that like sitting in the back of that car and feeling music and having it overwhelm you emotionally. I think that's why I gravitated to the drums so much. It's because it wasn't, there is some math to it, but like at the end of the day,
Yep.
it I can say, hey, play me a funk beat, and you can give me your version, I can give you my version, and they both can be right. They both can live in this like
Yeah.
cool. But I mean, that was the main thing is the fact that I could organically I feel like put myself out in a like an emotional way on the drum set as opposed to like guitar and stuff. I felt very limited
Yeah.
with chord structure and keys and
Yep.
a lot of that technical music theory stuff kind of went a little over my head, but drums are where I felt very at home and very like very free, very organic.
Yeah, I want to get to the. I want to pivot in a minute to the career side, but actually, and you're gonna probably know who it is, but there's this new, not new, but there's this Instagram account channel where they bring professional musicians in and they let them listen to the song once and then they're like, all right, go play drums on
Mm.
it. And it's a
Oh
drum
yeah,
focused thing.
yeah.
And I just had this conversation with someone about Chad Smith. He's never heard a 30 Seconds to Mars song, and he just rips through this compelling, and in some ways it's literally like the record, in other ways it's him. But that is that innate that you're talking about. On guitar you
Yeah.
could be technically proficient, but with drums you just inherit it. And that to me seemed what watching Chad Smith, the joy, the just creativity, and it just sort of oozed out of him. It was just he knew the technical side, and he's like, all right, I think it's in three, now I'm just gonna go into it. And it
Yeah.
seems like that's what you're inhabiting the music.
Absolutely, and there are don't get me wrong. There are bass players, guitar players, piano players. Like there's a ton of musicians that put themselves in. I mean, I did a show recently, and we had Chuck Leavell come out and
Yeah.
from the Rolling Stones, and he's got a different feel. It just
Yeah.
feels different, And some of those people you just can't. Hendrix on guitar, and I'm sure there's a million of them, but
Yeah,
those
yeah,
people that you can't deny who that is. Like
yeah. 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 I think for me right now, someone really interesting in that space is John Mayer, right? Who
mhm,
goes from, and you could go with Bruno Mars on the other side, but they're jukeboxes, right? And they can
mhm,
really inhabit anything. And now he's fronting the Dead, right?
yeah.
He's an interesting example of that. But I want to pivot now back to sort of the career side. So, you have this growth in junior high through high school. And then where do you go? When are you in your first band, and what
Uh,
does that journey take you to?
it was shortly right after high school, and it was a band called Main Street East, who I'm like still like dear friends with all the guys, but we don't really talk as much. It was like the one of the musical projects I'm the most proud of. We did an EP and we did a full length record. One of our big achievements was we licensed a song to HBO for an ad campaign. This was right when like on demand was starting,
Yeah.
and we had a song called Anything at All, and this was right when you could choose anything at all. And so that was really that was really flourishful, very possible and stuff. And but like one thing too, kind of touching on the John Mayer thing, like I actually knew John a little bit back in Atlanta back in '98. I went to high school with a guy named Clay Cook, they were in a band called Lo-Fi Masters together. And honestly, I kind of blame John for like sort of the my drive a little bit, because we were all hanging out and hearing them kind of work on songs, and then like then seeing that song on VH1 and stuff. It was like,
Yep.
whoa, it made it tangible. It made it
Yep.
so possible and tangible that it was like somebody I connect with and hang out with is now achieved like the next tier, where it always seemed to be like this mysterious, like you know I think when we're young and we're music fans, we go to concerts, we just think that distance between the stage and the crowd is so far. And
Yeah.
when you have someone kind of break that, you're like, whoa, like we can do that, like that's
Yeah.
possible. So that's I
They go
blame him
from
a lot.
fantasies to dreams, right? They go from
Yeah.
fantasies to dreams.
Yeah, it's just like, oh my gosh, like this is obtainable. And that was eye-opening. And that was what really fueled a lot of my drive. Just because I was like, oh, well, we're just next. We're just the next.
Yeah.
It's just a
Yeah.
matter of time. Like that kind
Yeah.
of that I had that kind of mentality, like, early on, and stuff like that. I mean, later on you find out it's a lot harder. A lot of hoops to jump
Yeah.
through.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it gave a lot of good fuel to the fire for sure. Um,
So how do you do so touring musician, right? I know you were out on the road with Gary and Main Street East. And what is that moment where you're like, whether it's the opportunity presented itself first, or you're like, I've sort of taken the touring musician as far as I can go. I want to get into the business side. Where does that pivot come to now being, more on the business side, and you're still making music, you're still, you're out with the artist, but it's a different role. So talk about that pivot. Where does that come from?
Financial security is one is
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
strong aspect of it. You start to realize, like, what I started doing was do these tours. One of my um, first gigs as a guitar tech was in '06. I get a call from my buddy Clay Cook, and he asked me, do you want to go out with my uncle's band as a guitar tech? And I said, yeah, that sounds amazing. We hang up the phone. I call a guitar player and I said, I just said I'm yes to a guitar tech job. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what it even details, like kind of like when I tell people I am a guitar tech and they're like, so what is that? Like,
Yeah.
you just tune guitars? Like, that's it?
They
Um,
give you the RCA
and
dog look.
yeah,
The head
exactly.
tilt. Yeah, yeah.
And so I did that. I did probably more bartending than guitar tuning, but it was a great experience. That was with the Marshall Tucker band, and I was with them for a little while. And it was one of those where I started seeing the moving parts, and that's where I started focusing. I was like, oh wow, like there's an art to sound engineering. There's an art to drum teching. There's an art to these other positions that are kind of behind the scenes that help flow the show. Production managers and tour managers and day-to-day people and stuff like that. And it was a smaller camp than what I experience now. But it was really eye-opening, and knowing that, like, I was like, all these people have jobs. Like, these are things you could do. This is so cool. I'm used to just lugging my drums up, you know,
Yeah.
Miss Old Bar, and and trying to get enough friends out, to shows. And this was definitely a pivoted change. And so, like, Yeah, one other aspects I like about it is like I don't have to learn music. Like I just have to kind of like learn the show or learn what
Yeah.
guitar they want on one, tuning. And one thing I like to say that I do is I set up the stage every single time for the artist to be able to perform at their highest level that they can. So if they are, like I mean, you just want them to be the best players they can be, and I'm just there to help. So I don't know. Did that answer the question? I think I
No,
got
that
off the rails
that
a little.
totally that. No, that's great. And so what is that feeling like? And on a lesser degree, I had that moment, right? I played a college sport, and I think I'm going to be, I'm going to go pro, and that's my
Yeah.
future. And then the cold reality of that's never going to happen hits you, and I'm like, okay, what am I good at next? What's my path? What is that? What is your view on music at that point when you're like, all right, I'm not creating the music anymore? As you said, you're setting the stage for that artist to be their best example. So, what is that like? What does music become to you at that point when you're like, all right, my main profession isn't creating music anymore? It's really managing this theater that's happening in all these different venues across America and the world. What is that transition? What is that
It
like?
it kind of goes back to being a fan again and getting to like kind of
Mm-hmm.
enjoy it and look at music kind of in an innocent kind of way again. I still do some recordings on drums. I still kind of I write music with people and stuff like that. So I still get to kind of scratch that itch, but it's not so demanding as it was. When I first moved to Nashville, I was in a touring band and we were doing about 300 dates a year, and it was great. And then when that ended, I kind of got like the rug pulled out from underneath me, and so it was like so here I am. I'm in the city I wanted to move to. I'm in the industry I want to move to. I want to work in, and how do I keep afloat? And I realized early on I'm a AAA ball club drummer at best. And using your sports analogy, I think it's one of those things where you play until you realize you've kind of played at the right
Yeah.
to your level. There
Yep.
was guys that were just learning music faster than me. They play it identical to the record that depending on who the session or studio drummer was, whatever. I wanted to put more of me in a lot of the songs, and that wasn't really the direction that a lot of people were going. Maybe in the right band, I'm their drummer, but as of
Yep.
right now, I've just really kind of accepted the role that I am, and I've always kind of worked in music. I've worked in a lot of like music retail. I've worked working on guitars, building guitars, selling guitar. Yeah, like I mean, all the different facets. So it was only kind of a matter of time before the two would merge. My touring experience
Yep.
and my guitar like tech experience would collide. So
Yeah, a couple observations though there. Like, playing AAA ball is pretty good, man. Like that's there are only so many
oh
people
yeah,
doing that, right? So that's and
very
I
true.
know what kind of musician you are, and you're fantastic. And so that's a high bar, right? And but now, you've gone from AAA to now the major leagues and on one of the
Yeah.
biggest teams, certainly in your industry. And so that's no small feat. What does leadership in your new role look like? You talked about you're really setting the stage, but as a professional, and you look at your role as a professional, there's tremendous pressure and responsibility, I imagine, because you have an off night and now Sam's got an off night or the band's got an
Yeah.
off night potentially, right? So what does
Oh, absolutely.
leadership look like to you in this new role?
It's just accountability for yourself, and then accountability for like I mean, as long as you're, I mean, growing with the technology as well. I know that when we first started, like Sam used actual guitar amps and stuff, and now we're more of on like redundant fractal rigs that are getting MIDI sent from like playback and all that. So there's like that element of staying current with the technology and just making yourself accountable and being present, be there, be focused. If you're having a bad day, that can't reflect over onto the stage or anything like that. My guys come up to me, they expect something goes wrong. I've got a quick checklist that I go down, and then I just you try to be able to handle it. Try to make sure
Yeah.
you just keep the show going.
Yeah, and I also know, Sam's not your only gig, right? When you have these downtimes, it looks like you also play different roles. Like
Mhm.
you were a tour manager this past year for another act. What is that like? Does that allow you to stretch and learn some new muscles and new muscle memory?
Absolutely. I mean, I've got this quote that if someone said it, then someone let me know so I can give them credit. But like, you can't train experience, and one of my things is like I've done so much when it comes to music. It's like you being a tour manager for a club tour doesn't really scare me that much. I did it as a drummer, you know what I mean? I've been in a lot of those
Yeah.
same rooms as a drummer. I've been in there maybe even as a guitar tech. So it just, whatever experience or whatever knowledge I have that I can implement and I feel confident enough that I can like take on those roles. I mean, I'm probably not going to be a production manager anytime soon. That is a pretty heavily weighted,
Yeah.
position. But a tour manager for a small, van tour, club kind of tour, I'm perfectly comfortable with that. There's a lot of um I've done merchandise, I've done merch. That's, I've got a bit of a retail background, and then,
Yeah.
again, being able to do the being able to like engage with people and stuff like that. It's all just part of it. It's all just all the little lessons and stuff, and then me just being like, yeah, I can fulfill that. That's seems pretty easy.
I love you can't train experience. I often, as I talk to younger professionals, whatever the industry, I always use sort of two things. One is, just put your head down and do the work. And when
Hmm.
you pick your head up again and see how far you've come and how far you've grown, right? That's that doing the work and getting the experience. And
Yeah.
the other is you're always building a toolbox, right? So
Hmm.
you've been on the road. You're like, well, I know what happens,
Yeah.
when we lose the trailer or
Oh yeah.
the merch situation. You've dealt with it, you've managed it,
Mhm.
and so now when you can do that for someone else, it's just you've got the toolbox.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is like I remember in the very beginning with Marshall Tucker band and being like guitar string breaks and I'm like timid. I'm like, wait, do I just go out there? But people can see me. It's
Yeah,
like, no, that's what you're there for, idiot. Like get
yeah,
out
yeah.
there. And
Yeah,
and now it's like I'll be halfway on the stage before because I thought I heard something wrong, or
yeah,
something of
yeah,
that
yeah,
nature. Or
yeah,
something like, like something's just off or,
yeah,
just I don't know, like little things like that. You just go out there and maybe put a drink out or put some picks,
yeah.
more picks out, or those little things. Just you're just impulsively just go at that point.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I want to be respectful of your time. It's valuable and I appreciate you. Let me give you
Oh,
a couple more questions. So, what does the arc look like for you as you look forward to your career and where you're going? You're a young man still and, in a critical industry. What's the future look like for you?
it's a good question. I'm actually like contemplating that now. It's like
Yeah.
because I used to say I would do touring and guitar tech stuff as long as I physically can. But being a father of two, I I I don't want to be a candy cane. Like when
Yeah.
I get off the
Yeah.
road, one of the like leaning over the
Yeah.
walker. I want to still have some physical abilities to play and not just veg out on the couch all the time. So I think it will dictate itself, just like it
Yeah.
dictated itself going like getting involved in this. I'm very, 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 very lucky that my phone rings. And so work isn't really the problem. It's just a matter of like how long can I physically do this and still have, the strength to keep on going, be a present father and stuff like that
Yeah.
for my girls.
Yeah, I saw an amazing photo when you posted it, but then just sort of going back and getting ready for this, I saw a great photo of you with your two little girls on the road,
Yeah.
and you used in a couple different photos core memories.
But
So
yeah,
talk a little about road life is demanding. So talk about the what's a core memory and how do you manage that life on the road with a family?
that I have to like just congratulate my wife because
Yeah,
if she wasn't as cool and as calm and collective to like allow me to kind of do what I do, and
yeah,
that's a huge element for it. We didn't meet until, like late 2014, 2015. And so like for maybe because we met so much later in life, maybe I was kind of like looking for that person that would kind of like allow me to still kind of be I always just put music first, like
yeah,
like before everything. And that's kind of the whole like I mean kind of talking about your podcast, your theme and stuff. I just held on to a dream longer than most. I just wanted to work in music. That's it. And whether it was selling guitars, whether it was tuning guitars, whether it was building guitars, whether it was playing drums, in the van driving the bus, it didn't matter. Like I just wanted to be a part of it. And I
yeah,
feel so lucky. I still pinch myself every day that, you know, there's not a venue in this country that I've not check the box off of, as far as like
Yeah.
iconic,
Yeah.
legendary places, and I've been paid to go all over the world and stuff like that. And that to me is what it kind of all is all about, and you know, just so many jobs where you make like nothing, but you're there, and
Yeah.
knowing, but also kind of being conscious enough to know where you are in that level, because a lot of times you could get like in a rut, they'll be all negative Nancy about, oh man, I'm
Yep.
never getting out of this warehouse. It's like you're right if you have that mentality. But if
Yeah.
you keep your options open, you're doing this job so you have the freedom for that next gig.
Yeah.
That's what kind of I remember my first guitar tech gig outside of playing drums with a artist named Casey Musgraves, and a buddy of mine just called me and said, "Hey man, I think you'd be great for this. Do you have the time? Do you have the availability?" And I did. So
Yeah.
that lent itself to that position. That worked out really well. And that was like kind of a
Yeah.
nice launching pad into that world up here. So now it's funny because Atlanta, they know me as a drummer. Nashville knows me as a guitar tech. I don't know what they think of me in Chattanooga, being the middle ground there.
No, that's awesome. And man, I love held on to the dream longer than most. So much of our life is just showing up and being
Mhm.
present and doing the work and believing that there's a path for you and there's a reason there. One last question, I think, or maybe two. So you talked about now that you have the opportunity, you sort of create music for yourself or on your own. Is that how you stoke your passion? How do you keep when you're off the road and you're spending time with family? That's obviously important to you and
Mhm.
to me as well. How do you sharpen the axe when you're not on the road?
I mean, it's funny where music, like you and I, we grew up with the radio and
Yep.
MTV, and there was a curated sort of like path where people heard music, and then the internet just blew everything wide open, because then it was like, oh well, some kid with an acoustic guitar down the road could blow your mind with a song or something, and you're listening to his like SoundCloud, more than you're listening to Spotify or
Yeah.
something. But
Yeah.
my 9-year-old shows me some new artists, and I love seeing her get excited about artists. Like
Yeah.
right now, I think it's like Taylor Swift. We call him Uncle Sam at our house, and Benson Boone are like her
Yeah.
favorites. And it's like one of those where I'm like, I just love seeing her. I'm just having a blast watching her get excited about music, and it's making me
Yeah.
kind of like love the artist even more because I'm seeing
Yeah.
what the effect is doing with her. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I am musically right now. I'm inspired by just everyday stuff, like I have always been.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of that drive for that isn't as strong. I'm really just shifting gears quite a bit. I never thought this was where I was going to land, but I'm very comfortable landing here.
Yeah.
Um, and it may not, the story's still unwritten. I guess it's like
Yeah.
we're this is just this chapter.
Yeah.
I
I
like to
think
think,
there's a song with that line in there. The story's still unwritten, but
yeah.
yeah, yeah, it is amazing. Just as an aside, I was just in Ireland for work, and whether it's the algorithm picks up that I'm there, and all of a sudden I've got 3 new artists I'm listening to
Mhm.
from Northern Ireland or the UK, just because Instagram sent them my way. It
Yeah.
really is amazing how versus before it was, I had one station that you'd fight through computer or through commercials and get to record a song so you could listen to it whenever you wanted. That was the thing. And so music is omnipresent now.
Mhm.
And it's
Absolutely. I
everywhere.
mean, I remember seeing, God, I think I saw like August Anna opening for Switchfoot or something, and that's like my first time seeing them. And then I remember like,
Yeah.
buying the CD and checking them out the next time they came at the smaller club and everything else. And that like that was a lot of that was another thing. There's a whole nother aspect to, I guess, my life and career, I guess, and that is like I networked like crazy. I was constantly going to local shows in Atlanta, making friends. I used to go to Eddie's Attic on Mondays when they
Hmm.
would do the open mic nights, and I'd wait for an artist to be like that would move me a little bit or enough to be like,
Yeah.
hey, we should start a band together. I was that guy. I was like scrappy dude, just like probably super annoying, but it lent to like all these great friendships. And then as the people that held on longer they're like, hey, you still play drums, like like that kind of thing, and I mean that's I think a huge part of it. Don't be annoying, but be present and
Yeah.
be around. And the more you can kind of understand the scope of it all, I never tried to like insert my opinion too much. I just tried to listen a lot and just make people laugh and just sort of like
Yeah.
be a good hang. And
Yeah.
honestly, that carries over even to now, where like
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how good of a tech you are, the hang factor is
Yeah.
massive on the road.
Yeah, you're stuck in a tin can going down the road. People want to, be able to spend time with you and not lose
Yeah.
it. So, yeah. Well, last question, and again, appreciate your time. Do you have advice for other people who are trying to figure out their passion or figure out where their passion takes them?
I heard this from somebody and they said whatever you talk about till you're blue in the face, if like no matter what time of day, no matter what it is, whatever the subject matter is that you want to talk about, you should do that. You should work in that world. If it's music, work in music. If it's movies, movies. If it's whatever it is, that like, and yeah, just like that age old quote. If you love what you do, you never work a day of your life. I mean, that's all I've been doing. Like I
Yeah.
haven't worked in over 20 years. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a blast. I never wake up and go, "Oh, have a case of the Mondays." It's always,
Yeah.
I'm packing for the next city and getting ready and,
Yeah.
this and that. And I love that. I love people, music, and travel. And I've finagled a way to get paid for it and make a decent career out of it. So, I mean, I would just say, just keep holding on.
Yeah. That's a perfect way to end it. Craig Eck, it's so great to catch up with you. Glad you're
You
on
too,
here.
bud.
Thanks for your time. And this is the Walk On Podcast, people leading with passion and purpose, providing a roadmap for your personal journey. Hear their stories, find your passion, walk on. Craig, great to see you again. Thank you.
You too, brother. Be safe.
Thanks.
And you're back-to-back national champions. How do you keep a team grounded amid those expectations and your own inside the room and those heavy ones from outside?
You know what? The guys have done a good job with that. We have a saying that, say nothing when you lose and say less when you win. And the guys embrace that.
Well, I was hanging around when you noticed me looking at you. Well, I've been staring for hours, thinking about exactly what to do to you. I can't believe you didn't notice the 1,000 times I walked by you.